Well, I gotta say, I am excited about all of my interviews, but really nervous about them anymore. But I gotta admit, I was a little nervous about this one because Phoebe, you have been literally the soundtrack to my 2020. I'm
Oh
not
my
kidding.
gosh.
I'm not
Thank you
kidding.
so
Like,
much.
thank you so much. I cannot tell you how many times I have literally been walking through the woods, watching my dog chase deer that she'll never catch, listening to Phoebe Bridgers, and also maybe sometimes crying just a little bit. Thank you for the catharsis.
I love that so much. I love that that's my compliment. Like I've signed myself up to being like, man, I lost it so hard the other day in my car, and I'm like, thank you. You know, it's great.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I mean, like, and I'm sure you must be hearing from so many people this year, more than maybe other years that you've been making music, about how your specific style of songwriting and just musical styling is so good to get listeners into that place of like emotional catharsis. And it seems like we've all needed more of that this year. Like, do listeners just hit you up all the time saying, "Thanks for the good cry today. Really appreciated it."
Yeah, I think I have always had that, but it does seem like this year specifically, it's like a wider audience of people that want to commiserate.
Yeah.
Um, which, yeah, it feels. I think this about music always, but you can't help but kind of like romanticize yourself and think you like predicted the future or something. But um, like people were accusing Bright Eyes of that this year because they wrote an apocalyptic um album,
Yeah.
And Connor was kind of like, I've literally always written about the apocalypse. Like so I don't know. It's just lucky this year, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it is a really timely year for an album like Punisher, which deals with themes of boredom and melancholy and sadness and loss. Like, it's a really timely year for that kind of album to come out when we're all having to really sit with those emotions more than usual. I mean, you couldn't have planned it better.
Yeah, it seemed like I couldn't have planned it worse. Like in the beginning. I'm glad I wasn't one in the middle of making something or in the middle of a tour, but
Yeah.
I had literally just finished the record. Well, I finished like the last music video for the record like the day before lockdown, where we were all like, is this real? Is this
Wow.
what's happening? And then I finished or I was gonna the next week then fly to Japan for tour. So it was just the weirdest. I was like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, fi. But then I have friends like Caroline Polachek was stuck in London, like because she was in the middle of a tour, and yeah, it's been a nightmare, but also kind of nice to be going through some sort of like I think people are answering like how are you more accurately this year,
Oh my
which
God.
is
Yeah.
so rad. Like instead of like, "Oh my gosh, fine, everything's great." Like the answer now the obligatory answer is, "Well,
Yeah.
everything sucks, but
Yeah. On
yeah.
that theme, how are you as this 2020 kind of comes to a close?
I am very lucky. I have experienced nothing other than boredom, no personal losses. Um, again, the collective trauma of reading and watching too much news, but I consider myself very lucky, and I live in LA where I can still go outside um because it's not winter, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So I'm doing relatively fine. How are you?
I'm good. I actually had been in LA for years, and I came back home to Texas around July to be closer to family. And yeah, it's just been like 6 months of not having a permanent address. Half my stuff's in storage. A few things are here, and just getting used to that uncertainty. Like, I'm 36 years old now. I'm pretty methodical, and like this year has been just flux, 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 flux. But you make peace with it and you're stronger for it, I think. So I'm ultimately fine. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of tour a little bit. That
Yeah.
feeling of just being like in between moves or people who are making big life choices and then are like, well, I guess it
Yeah.
just has to remain kind of half.
Yeah.
done for
Half in,
and
half out. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
How much do you miss tour? Because you've talked about tour and like some of the lyrics in the album are alluding to tour life. I can't tell if you love being on tour or hate it or something in between.
Yeah, the answer is yes. I I tweeted at the very beginning of the pandemic, and I still think about it every day, which is I can't wait to hate tour again. Like I can't wait to be 2 days into tour and
Yeah.
think, oh my god, like this is so hard. Um, I went on like a small press trip in New York in February,
Hmm.
and I was having that kind of like welling up, overwhelmed feeling where I was like, oh my god, like I'm asking for it again. I'm gonna be miserable again. I'm so busy, and I'm the queen of kind of leaving my DOP kit in a hotel room and not realizing it for 3 days and having my manager
uh,
like ship it to the other, like just having all your, it takes so much to be a human being in just day-to-day life, but on tour
yeah.
you're like, oh my
You're
god,
moving
did
your
I
humanness to a new spot every day.
yeah, you're like, did I leave my wallet at the Love's truck stop? Or, oh my, I have to get up from the bus and go to the hotel, and maybe I'll shower in the venue because the hotel's kind of far. And just, it's like mental math every day. Um,
Hmm.
and now I'm finding myself really romanticizing that and missing it.
Yeah.
When I'm on tour, I'm like saving like recipes, like vegan recipes on Pinterest, and like romanticizing like my own garden and stuff. And then I get home and I'm like, man, I used to just travel and like without a care in the world. I was so spontaneous. So I'm trying to like be grateful for this time, but also I miss tour so much.
Yeah.
um I would go on the worst tour on earth right now if I
Really.
could. Yeah, if I could snap my
De-
fingers. Yeah.
Describe the worst tour. What does the worst
Um
tour look and feel like?
like a tour in somewhere where they don't speak English and the shows are kind of half full. Oh, there's this thing in kind of like around Germany, and where I have like a ton of fans. I love playing in
Okay.
Germany.
You're
It's
big in
so
Germany. Love it.
it's so fun. Like I played a summer festival and it's beautiful. Like I don't think I really realized I had German fans until like 2 years ago, and I was playing a summer festival, and the backstage, the stage was kind of hidden from me, and I walked out on stage and was like, oh, like immediate stage fright. But they're so polite that the applause is kind of like, and it's very gaslighting. It's like, wait,
Explain.
like, because in America,
We're
you
like,
it,
yeah.
yeah, you have the opposite problem where someone screams something inappropriate, and then everybody screams at that person, and you feel responsible for like a huge party. Um, so I think the worst tour would be somewhere where people are super polite, the shows aren't uh selling well, and you're playing in like a basement or something, which I have definitely done my fair share of that. Um but yeah,
But look at you
it
now.
sounds fun in retrospect.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But in spite of you not being able to tour this year, in spite of this year being weird, you've had a really successful year as well. I mean, you had your first appearance on the Billboard Hot 100. Congratulations.
Thank
You
you.
got several Grammy nominations, including one for Best New Artist. Also, Grammys. Phoebe's been around for a while, but hey, take the nod. Um, it's a weird year to have a good year, but you had a good year. Um, how does living with that kind of success as a musician feel in the midst of this when you can't be out with your fans, when you can't be torn, when you can't really even, I don't know, go to the Grammys?
I think part of it is humbling because
Mm.
I am in my same apartment that I've been in since I was 18. I
What?
Yeah,
Wow.
because because I tour so much, I
Yeah.
couldn't justify like
Yeah.
some beautiful like new apartment, and I it's cozy and I love it. It's a great location, but I my life is exactly the same
Mm.
as it always has been, except minus music. Obviously, like solitary writing is still the same. I think there's a weirdly good part of it, which is um, every there are good and bad parts, but everybody's internet is so curated to be like, you are the center of the world,
Mm-hmm.
and these are your fans, and I'm really, really good about not burying myself in critiques or, you know, YouTube comments. Um, so yeah, I've always been the center of my own online presence, and when it's the only way you exist, it's hard to really take note and notice. Like, I wish that I could go to fun parties with my friends, and I miss like running into people that I wasn't expecting to see. Like, yeah, everything's so planned, who you talk to, and
Yeah.
but it's surreal for sure, but I think there's a weirdly nice part of it just being like, I am in my safe place.
Yeah, you're in your
You
safe
know?
place. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a weird time to be a creative though, because like you have more time to create. You have more time to sit down and write songs if you want to. But so often, I think what sparks creativity is serendipity
Yes.
and chance encounters.
Mm.
And those are just happening less, like you've said. Like, have you found this year to be more inspiring as a songwriter or less?
I think I'm always kind of the same. I think that was I think that was disappointing
No,
because
it's not. It's fine.
but because being on tour, you feel like you're having an affair with music, where
Wow.
you know, you sneak backstage for 20 minutes and you try to hash out a little idea that you had. Or like my song Savior Complex, I wrote in my sleep on accident, like just the melody. I could never write words in my sleep, but I had this I woke up with this weird melody in my head, and
Huh.
there's something so romantic about that. But yeah, you do wish you had more time to hash it out. And then, like every other person on earth who makes stuff with their brain, at the beginning of COVID, I was like, can't wait to write my 5 albums.
Uh-huh.
And I think I've written like exactly the same amount of songs that I did last year. Um, I
Really?
I don't want to say I'm slow. I think I'm deliberate. Like,
There you go.
I'll I had a therapist say that to me once, and I was like, I think yes, because I'll draft a song first. Like, I can write a song fast, but then my favorite version of it is after I've thought about it every day for like 6 months, and the weird little phonetic, like, it's just so unrecognizable to where it was in the beginning.
Huh.
So I think instead of writing a lot of songs, I write the same song like 5 times, and then the fifth version is always sort of my favorite.
Huh. Which song on Punisher was the most worked through like that?
I think it was probably the last song on the record, the I Know the End song.
I was hoping you'd say that because that song does some stuff. Tell me all about it.
Thank you. Yeah, so the beginning of it, it was just this super miserable song that my drummer and I were writing about breaking up, which is also, yeah, I love
Because
music
y'all
for that
dated.
reason. Yeah, we dated, and
And then
um
wrote a broke up song together, Phoebe?
yeah, yeah,
Oh
and
my God.
I know, it's
You're
so
better
it's
than me. You're better than me.
I think we met and then were like immediately codependent, and I think there were just a couple years of like, who are we to each
Oh
other?
my
Like,
God.
we have not had a fraught relationship for the amount of drama that there could be. Like,
Okay.
we still talk every day. He's hilarious. But yeah, but he's kind of the first person that I run ideas past.
Hmm.
He's like him and my guitar player Harry have been like, you know, they make my records with me, and uh
Yeah.
yeah, it feels awesome. But he had this like miserable couple verses, and I just didn't really resonate with them. I mean, maybe they're just because it was his experience, but
Yeah.
uh I probably wrote like 5 different versions, and then 3 years later, literally, I was like, I want a song on the album with a crazy outro, and and then yeah, that song is a piece of everything because it took a really long time to write some of it, and then the last piece just kind of came super fast. Like, that whole
Hmm.
outro section is just
It
I
gets
just sat down and
cacophonous.
wrote it.
It gets
Yeah.
louder and louder and yelling and screaming. So that came easier than the earlier stuff in the song.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh? Huh? What are you trying to convey in the end of the song? So like the lyrics are about a breakup, but like at the end it crescendos and it becomes is angrier the word, but then it ends up just in your face, and then there's some yells, and then there's like trumpets blaring, and then it stops, and then I hear this weird loud breathing, and
Yeah.
I'm like, what is that? So
I
yeah,
don't
what
think
is that?
I don't think I think about it until after. Like I have all the ideas. Like I'll even have them not connected to a song. I'm like, okay, I want a crazy outro, and I want to scream, and I want it to sound like Sufjan Stevens, and I want uh to have fake cheering at the end of the song. Um, but I I think I was reading Her Body and Other Parties at the time by Carmen Maria Machado, and she has a story called Inventories where it's like all the people that she slept with during the apocalypse. It's
Okay,
like I think it's like a zombie apocalypse, but
love it.
I was thinking about that a lot, and the way that it ends is she's on this island writing in her journal. She's writing lists to keep herself sane. So just the
Mm.
sleeping with people list is a list. But
Mm-hmm.
she ends up on this island alone, and I guess I thought if the world was going to end, I'd go up to like Big Sur. I spent a lot of my childhood in Northern California, so um, thinking about where like the fictional place I would escape to, kind of.
Wow, Big Sur's a
Yeah.
nice pick.
Oh, that's great.
Wow, wow. And so, what do you want listeners to take from a song like that? Like it's about breakup, but it's about apocalypse, and it's also about just like the primal scream. Like I hear so many themes and ideas when you talk about this song. Like, what are you hoping the listeners leave that song with?
My hope always is that I can be universal in specificity. I love hearing what other people take from things because it puts me in the position of pretending like I'm smarter than I am. When someone's like, it reminds me so much of this, and this, or this time in my life, or this book that I loved. And I'm like, yeah, exactly.
That's what I was
That's
going for.
yeah, totally. So I think I just kind of like it takes me a really long time to figure out what I wanted initially. My favorite thing about songwriting is that is stuff like this where I'll uh maybe it's the you know back of my mind or uh I'm not really intending to put a point across and then later I'll realize what it means. But I drove up to Big Sur like at the beginning of October
Hmm.
and just by myself
Yeah.
for like no reason. So I think I had been really thinking about it. Um, and the world is sort of ending. So uh, so yeah, it's like even more fun to sing now.
Yeah. Well, and it's like you talk about that specificity. Like there are these verses in I Know the End that like aren't about a relationship I've ever had, but I'm like, yeah, Phoebe, you get it. Like my verse 2. Out in the park, we watched the sunset, talking on a rusty swing set. After a while, you went quiet, and I got mean. I'm always pushing you away from me, but you come back with gravity. That is universal. That is like, that's real. That's real. And I was thinking in advance of this interview about the ways in which your specificity really works in your songwriting. And everyone that writes about your songwriting talks about the specificity. And for me, like, I think I first fell in love with the specificity of your lyrics, probably with your song Funeral, which I still probably play like once a week. But on the latest album, on Punisher, what does it the most for me is probably Chinese Satellite.
Cool.
Like the way it opens, I'm just like, oh, how is she in my brain? Like I've been running in circles, pretending to be myself. Like I want to find the right lyric. Who changed it? Give me 1 second, Phoebe.
No, all good.
No, that's not it. Okay. When you sing I've been running around in circles, pretending to be myself, and then you say, drowning out the morning birds with the same three songs over and over. I'm like, was she watching me? How does she know? And like, I wonder when you're writing that specifically, is there a barometer for you about how specific to get, how detailed to get? Because there's a balance to strike, right? Because you don't want to write something that like no one will understand, but you want it to be specific to you, I'm guessing.
I'm realizing that people don't always know what I'm talking about, which is very weird. I think I just assume everybody knows what I'm talking about all the time. But it is a matter of personal taste. I've definitely stopped myself from, just like reading the nutrition information on the back of like a pack of Fig Newtons or something in a song. Like just
But you know what? If you made it a song, I'd probably like it.
just like the balance of, am I being boring? Am I being annoying? Am I being kitschy? Am I now a cartoon of myself? But I don't really think that stuff until like 3 days after I write something, which is
Yeah.
again why I like editing. I don't think I really edit myself down usually. It actually when I rewrite, I think it becomes more specific. Um, I think that my songs kind of start universal, or I'll just
Mm.
have this weird floating idea that sounds like any song for the chorus, and then I'll phonetically match it with something hyper specific or something.
Yeah. 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 Well, and it's like what I like about Chinese Satellite is that it starts out very specifically, and I'm like, I relate. And then the further you go, I'm like, I'm not sure if I get it, but I'm going with it. Like when you get to saying, took a tour to see the stars, but they aren't out tonight. So I wished hard on a Chinese satellite. I want to believe. Instead, I look at the sky and I feel nothing. For months, I've been like, is she talking about God or UFOs or a lover or all three? Does it matter if I know or don't know? But now that I've got you here, what are you talking about there?
Yes. I think yes, because the first one, it is aliens and God. Like
Okay.
just as a I've my friend Harry always says this, my guitar player, he's like, I just really wish I could make the leap to Jesus. Like I feel like I'm flailing around in my life, and it seems like those people have a lot of relief when they go to sleep at night, and I just wish I could make the leap. And I've always kind of felt like that, whether it was Harry Potter or aliens or just something to be passionately, or conspiracy theories or whatever, just be passionately positive that the version of reality that is being shoved down our throats is like not it, and that I know for a fact that this is real. And I don't even think I'm that cynical. I think I'm probably like primed for a cult. Um, so, but then the last verse is also sort of about missing somebody that, and it almost sounds like they're dead, but it's just like I pissed them off and they didn't want to talk to me, totally, justifiably,
Yeah.
like missing,
Yeah.
like feeling just kind of empty inside, like this person is on Earth, and uh, I can't reach them because I'm messed up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. What is your what's the thing you're most afraid of conveying in a song? Like what do you fear conveying in a song?
Ooh,
If anything.
yeah. I think this is super. That's a great question, because I think actually I'm afraid of accidentally conveying my own privilege and brattiness. I'm afraid of
Okay.
I'm afraid of putting my genuine soul into a song and then having someone be like, "What's her problem? Like, are you kidding me?" Uh and and I hear that in like some of my earlier music, and
Give me
that's
an example.
um I have I have like a really old song called Waiting Room, where I yeah, I wrote it when I was like 16, and people find it every once in a while and tag me in it or whatever. And I think I'm just,
Huh.
one, it's super sincere, and I meant everything, but it's so emotionally raw, and I'm so pining for someone that I ended up having a beautiful relationship with like 3 years of my life.
Okay.
I had like the best high school relationship where it was
I'm
not
jealous.
fumbly. Yeah, it was so just, yeah, it's like that doesn't happen. And I think the fact that I'm complaining so much in the song is, especially in retrospect, like, dude, you're fine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think I'm afraid of myself in 5 years hearing Punisher and being like, what are you talking
Really?
about? Yeah, kind of.
Really?
Yeah.
Which lyric are you most afraid you might regret from Punisher?
Um, Regret's a hard one because I think even if I stop resonating with it, I have that experience with fans or people that I'm fans of where I'm like, this song really connected with me, and they're like, really? Songs that they're totally over, and so I don't. So it's not really about regret because the way that people see it, it's just hearing myself in a different light and having more perspective on what was going on in my life at the time. Even now, listening to Punisher and constantly complaining about being on tour, I'm
Mm.
like, dude, like, get it
If you
together
knew.
and
Yeah.
live your life. So yeah, that whole
Yeah.
section, and like, I know the end where I'm talking about how depressed I am to be on tour and how depressed I am to be at home. Um, when all I really need to do to get out of a funk is like take a walk. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, just kind of like wallowing. Um, but I think that's always going to be a part of my songwriting. I think that's the mood I'm in when I write songs. So it makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk about another song on the album that's really, really quite specific. Kyoto, which is about your dad and your relationship with him. Um, it is, gosh, like it paints a picture right away, like in verse. Like, I've been driving out to the suburbs to park at the Goodwill and stare at the chemtrails with my little brother. He said you called on his birthday. You were off by like 10 days, but you get a few points for trying. Remember getting the truck fixed when you let us drive it. 25 felt like flying. And I hear the song. Well, one, the first time you hear it, you hear a happy song, not these sad lyrics, right? But then two, I hear those lyrics and I totally relate to it, even though that wasn't my dad. My dad wasn't like that. We had a different relationship, but I get it. What? Who were you writing that song to? Are you writing it to a certain type of listener? Are you writing it to your dad? Are you writing it to yourself?
It's kind of everyone. I think that there's a desire uh to it's almost like closure to have, especially a song you're proud of, not just like
Yeah.
writing a poem that you're not stoked on about something traumatic. I think that can just be kind of re-traumatizing. But singing a song like that every day and having to have conversations like this is weirdly its own form of therapy. You know what I mean? You're
Oh.
like, this is a thing in my life that should probably be examined.
Mm.
Um, and I should stop projecting this character onto partners or people I meet.
Mm.
Um, so, but it's funny because there are pieces that are about my dad, definitely the majority of it, and he's a Scorpio. Everyone's like, oh, "Are you a Scorpio?" I'm like, "No, my dad's a Scorpio." Um, but there's like a piece about my grandpa that's more. This is so funny. That's kind of more the missing the birthday thing.
Mm.
Like my dad's always very good about birthdays, and he we've like been talking again during COVID,
Mm.
which is so weird, but
You and your dad.
yeah, so nice. He
Okay.
also, we have never discussed the song. And then the other day he called me and was like, "So we got a Grammy for our song." And I was like, oh
I
man.
love that we. I love that
Yeah,
we.
exactly. And I was like, oh, ha 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 ha. But so the funniest thing ever happened, which is that, like I said, my dad's pretty good about birthdays. And then in the beginning of October, like October 10th, I'm not kidding. My dad called me and was like, "You know what day it is, right?" And I was like, "It's October 10th." And he was like, "It's your brother's birthday." And I was like, "Dad, Jackson's birthday is on October 19th. This is this year. And
He was referencing the lyrics?
I don't think so. He was like, I sent a package to the house. Also, to be early, like that's
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I immediately called like 5 people because I was like, I think either subliminal messaging, I like made this happen with my mind, or this is just the weirdest thing that's ever happened.
Or your dad has a good sense of humor. He hears a lyric about himself, about being off on the birthday by 10 days, and then he does that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that was one of the weirdest things, definitely. But yeah, it's like I've been able to open up a lot of stuff. And like you said, with like shared experience, I'll have like a friend be like, oh, my dad was sort of like that, or my dad was like that for like 5 years of my life, or we're good now. Just, it doesn't really matter if it's exact. I think that everybody can resonate with at least some sort of character like that.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, you put it out into the world and you don't even really know who it's for, and then it just kind of keeps on giving you reasons to exist.
Yeah. Does your dad like the song?
I hope so.
Does he like the way he's portrayed in it? Has he told you? Have you asked him?
Yeah, no, the Grammy joke was the first time we've ever discussed it. So
and that was it.
Yeah, and that was it. So we'll see.
What do you think he thinks about it, honestly?
This is a weird thing to say, but I feel like he might just be glad that I think about it. I think that he might be glad that I have the memory of learning to drive, or whatever. Or even the I don't forgive you, but please don't hold me to it lyric. It's like that just saying basically I'm gonna be ready to forgive you soon. And the fact that we've been talking more this year. So I hope he likes it. I hope whereas with a song like Funeral or something, sometimes I worry, like, do all the people involved with this song, or do they understand that I'm not like monetizing someone else's traumatic experience or something? Yeah. Like I worry about that too. Which is why I try to keep everything kind of in my own realm of personal experience, and not like, I wrote a song about my friend's drug addiction from her perspective, and I showed it to Tony Berg, who produced my first album. And then Ethan Gruska and I all produced the second album together. But he was like, you can't sing this. He's like, do you want to talk about being a drug addict forever, or have people assume that about you? Because I don't think you're ready to do that, because you're not. Yeah. And I was so pissed. And then I was like, wait, I think you're right.
Yeah. For listeners who don't know Kyoto yet, and they should know it, how much can you describe what your relationship with your father has been like, is now, to set up the context of these songs and those lyrics?
It's a very weird combination of like emotionally unavailable but very present in a weird way. And I think as an adult, I'm just kind of like looking back with more sympathy for my parents, which is great. Feels great. Yeah. It's nice to not feel like emotionally trapped all the time with stuff that you carry into your life. Like, I think I was angry for a long time, and it's the song is basically about like not being angry anymore,
which is a good way to feel and a good place to get to.
Totally.
And I think this thing happens in adulthood, where once you realize how hard it is to just be a grown-up, you forgive your parents, because you're like, they were trying the best, they were doing the best they could.
Totally.
And no one gets it all the way right. And A for effort, man. That's like, you did the best you could.
Thank you. Yeah. I feel that way about them. It's just, what are all those memes about? Like, it's like me at 25 or me at 30
or whatever. Yeah.
And then it's like, it's like my parents are like, do you want to have kids? And then I'm like, emailing my landlord, hey, can I have an extension on
Yeah,
rent? Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. What's interesting about Kyoto, you've talked about initially writing the song as a ballad, and the version that ends up in the album is one of the more upbeat tracks on Punisher. What made you switch it up like that?
Tony. Tony Berg. I always write ballads only, and then I've
Wow.
just relaxed into it now. I'm like, I
Yeah.
can't focus on instrumentation or orchestration. I want it to feel like a fully finished song alone in my apartment. And that's
Mm.
always a ballad.
Mm-hmm.
So I it was very sad, and also there were some melodies that I had to sacrifice to make it a rock song. But
Really?
the first record I kicked and screamed to do that because Motion Sickness for my first album was the exact same way.
Yes.
And and I
Wait, that was a ballad too to start?
yes, it was a ballad.
Stop.
It was a ballad,
What?
and it had like every chorus was different words, and it had no bridge. And I was like, it's gonna be. I had just finished tour with Julian Baker, and I was like, the only way to write songs is very soft guitar, and then you're screaming by the end of it, but it's like kind of like a torch song, which Julian does so well, and I was just trying to copy her. And we fought about it probably for like a week, and Tony was like,
Wow.
okay, entertain me, let's just record drums, do it a little faster. I feel like I couldn't get the phrasing right too. Like I was very anti and stressed about it. Really stressed. I love thinking about past stresses in context of my current stress because I'm like, someday the stress in my life will look ridiculous. But
Mm.
I was so stressed. I was like showing everybody one version and the other version back to back and being like, what's more effective and why don't I like the drums? And then now it's one of my favorite songs to play. So then with this record, I just was like, all right, let's do it.
Let's do
Let's
some drums. Why
let's
not?
yeah, let's turn this ballad into a rock song.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and then with Kyoto, what's even more interesting is that so the version we hear on Punisher is sped up with drums, and then you release this new EP, what, last week,
Mhm.
where you give us a stripped down string version of Kyoto, which I also love, but it made me wonder how are the words received differently when you hear the song in those different versions, you think?
I think that what's fun about the EP version of Kyoto is the context of the happy version.
Mm.
Um, because I'm proud of the lyrics, and I think it's fun to be proud of lyrics and kind of strip everything back. Like I didn't put any harmonies or any vocal layers on the record on the EP. Um, and I love doing that kind of stuff. It's one of my favorite things.
Mm.
But I think that my favorite songs to write and play and cover are songs that you could kind of do whatever you want to them and in any form. You know, when someone does like a acoustic cover of a punk song or a pop song and you're like, man, those lyrics suck. uh, I I love it when I feel like I don't have to hide under production, and I do think it makes it much sadder. We were kind of internally calling it Phoebe on Ice, the
Really?
the
The EP?
EP, just because it's so like Disney.
It is it's really cool, and like these are really lush string arrangements. And it takes these songs to a different level. I was wondering because it's, what is it, 4 or 5 songs on
Yeah, it's four.
Copycat Killer?
Yeah,
4. You could have picked as many as you wanted to. What made it those 4?
I said because Rob Moose does the string arrangements for my records. He's a legend. He also worked on Folklore and Bonnie Bear and FK Twigs, and he's just a genius. Um, and I just had such a good time working with him, and he always finds these reharmonizations in my music that make me feel like a genius. I'm like, man, I wrote that, but it's really Rob. So I just was like, what do you hear on the record? Like, what do you want to do? And then we agreed on all his picks, which
Okay.
was very fun.
It's fun because like, these string versions start and I'm like expecting to hear just a stripped down, slowed down version with strings of these songs with these chords. But then he starts to meander. And then there are these chord changes that come up that I wasn't expecting. And they still work with the melody. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I like it.
Yeah, he's a wizard.
Yeah. Which remix on Copycat Killer is your favorite?
I really like Kyoto because he texted me before he sent it to me like, "Yo, I just wrote what's going to be played at your funeral." and then and then and then I heard it and immediately was like, "Yeah." I also like Chinese Satellite because I think similarly it's one of the more produced songs on my record.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just I like stripping it back and kind of hearing it in that context, since I feel like it's like kind of like my Coldplay or U2 song on my record, and it's
Hell
nice to
yeah.
hear it. It's nice to hear it in like such a serious package, you know?
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
cool.
A thing I like about your music and your songwriting is that you will quite often respond to listener questions about your songs and your lyrics, which is like really cool and nice of you. And you don't have to do that. What do your listeners who reach out to you misinterpret or don't get the most?
One of the cutest ones was this girl on YouTube was listening. They were doing one of those reaction videos where you listen to
Oh,
a whole
yeah.
record and it's like reacts to Punisher by Phoebe Bridgers.
Yeah.
And
In real time as they listen.
in real time, and she was like, she gets to Moon Song and she's like, what does this mean? Like, I don't know what she's even talking about. She doesn't. She's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what this is about. Have no idea. And I was like, good. Like, I'm glad that, I mean, I don't know if she's like a teenager, but she was definitely a young woman. And I'm like, that's such a relief that you don't know what I'm talking about
She doesn't
in
know
this
that
song.
pain yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, now I'm looking up the lyrics again. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's brutal.
She shouldn't know that. She
No,
shouldn't know that yet.
She shouldn't. I love it.
What I love is how, from what I can tell, half of the internet thinks it's a metaphor, and probably less than half know that that actually happened to you. The lyric in Garden Song, when you write, the doctor put her hands over my liver and she told me my resentment's getting smaller. When I first heard it, I was like, whoo! Oh my God. Oh, this is it. And then I was reading about it and you were like, no, that just actually happened.
Yeah. I won't go into too much information.
I don't want you to go into all of it.
But I have this like nutritionist lady in LA who, you know, at risk of sounding like every LA person on earth, I think she literally saved my life. I was going through a thing where every time I went on tour, I'd get sick immediately. I had to be on antibiotics like 5 times one year. And someone recommended her to me and I went, and she just hit me with some like, you take this every day now. You don't eat sugar and you don't drink.
Oh my God.
And I wasn't even
I'm never going to go see her.
Totally. Yeah. That's what I thought. I was like, I literally eat like 5 packs of sour Skittles a day, which I'm serious. I really did do that for like years of my life. But
wow.
She was so nice, and I recommend everybody in LA with like any sort of health issues to go to her. But she said that to me once, and I feel like sometimes she can't tell when she's about to make me cry. But that definitely made me cry. And then like one time we were talking about something and she was like, are your palms sweating? I was like, yeah. She was like, good. Like we were talking about something kind of traumatic and she was like, you're working through it. Your palms are sweating.
Wow.
So very like witchy.
Wow.
Awesome.
Yeah. But also like, I love that. Right.
She also told me I can't be a witch because I was a witch in a past life. So.
I love this woman. I love this
like,
woman.
That's my favorite thing she's ever said to me. for sure. Like, no more witchcraft. Like, you were a witch already. I didn't say
Oh
anything
my
about
god.
witchcraft to her.
In that moment when you're at this healer's office and she places her hands over your liver, where exactly even is your liver? Somewhere down there.
Yeah.
In the moment that she tells you that she feels your resentment getting smaller, what's your first thought? What's your first reaction laying on that table?
Well, she told me to write a letter to my dad,
Oh.
and was like, that was the first time. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't want to do that. And you know, I she made me start drinking less coffee, but I this is all pretty extreme. I was drinking like 10 cups of coffee a day. Um
Phoebe.
I know, rough. I was very anxious. Um very, yeah, just I didn't really know how to handle traveling all the time. And um sh- and also she said that to me without any uh context of my life.
Mm.
She was like, I think you should write a letter to your dad. Like
Wow.
she does definitely have some weird
Yeah.
stuff where I'm like,
Yeah.
are you reading my email? Like, what's happening? But um and then so we had talked a little bit about resentment and stuff, and then she said that to me out of nowhere. You know, in the middle of telling me to eat more salad or leafy greens or whatever, she was like, also your resentment's getting smaller. I can feel it. And I just, to be recognized in that way, it's like when your therapist tells you you're doing a good job or you're doing the best
Yeah.
you can, and you're like, oh,
Yeah. Well, it's
what?
also like Q Waterworks. Oh my god.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally, totally.
Does she know she's in the song?
I don't think so.
You gotta tell her. You
I'm
gotta
almost
tell
positive she has a flip phone, so I
her.
should tell her.
Please tell. I think she would really love that. I think she would
Yeah.
love that. Yeah. So, okay, one of the things that I've really been interested to ask you about is your musical background. You weren't always making music like this, from what I understand, right?
Yeah.
Like, you studied vocal jazz. You were
Hmm.
in a punk band for a while. You went to Berkeley School of Music for what, a week? How long?
You know, I went to the orientation of Berkeley School of Music and didn't go. No, they had like an LA thing for people who'd gotten in. And my mom was kind of just like, you just did this. I went to Loxa, which is a performing arts high school in LA,
hmm hmm
and we went to the orientation, and we were like, wait, it's 4 more years of music school, and you're not, like, if you want to be a classical guitarist or um don't have any like group songwriting experience or something, sounds great, but I literally had just done that. And you
Yeah,
know, nobody booking clubs is like, can I see your degree?
exactly. And once you
um
know the basics of music theory, you know the basics of music theory.
Totally, totally. And so at a certain point it was just like time to take responsibility and get a job. And so I, in Loxa, yeah, I did opera, I did vocal jazz, but then the last 2 years I did music technology, which was really great because it was mostly just sitting around and pressing record and making demos.
Yeah.
One of the songs is on my first record. I didn't demo it in class. I wasn't that good at being an engineer, but um, I think even songwriting wise, in early days I was kind of trying to make music because I really loved the idea of being a musician and I loved singing
hmm
and playing. Um but I was like, man, you really need songs to do this, and it was almost secondary.
Mm.
And now I consider myself someone with basically I just talk about my own experience now. That's the
Yeah,
difference.
yeah,
Um
yeah,
Sometimes I'll see a TV show that is really effective, but I'll always put myself in the first person.
yeah,
So
yeah. Was there like a certain path that led you from vocal jazz or opera or the punk band you were in to this very specific kind of emo indie? I don't even know what word you call your music. You tell me what word you call it now. But
well, I used to think I made folk music, and
hmm
kind of since the beginning of Always, my mom would take me to an open mic night at the Claremont Folk Music Center when I was like 13,
huh,
and I would play cover songs. And then I went to high school, and I was kind of just trying different stuff out, and opera and jazz were mostly just a vessel to uh, learn about music history, but also theory and like technique and singing with a group.
Yeah.
But I think I had a band in high school that was basically just like us trying to sound like Coldplay, which I know that you can find
Hey,
online, but
you.
like lots of drums and like very victorious music.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh yeah.
and then I think I just got more solitary. Like my whole band quit school to go on tour with another band. I was
Wait,
so
your
jealous.
band left you?
Yeah, my band left me because they were at Loxa too, and they went on tour. They quit my band to be in a band called Kitten, and they were touring and they toured with Paramore and they were like blowing up, and I was so jealous. And
Huh.
but I think it made my songwriting better. I think that when I just had to play shows by myself, I was like, man, some of these lyrics aren't that good, or I should probably focus on how to make this the best thing possible. And then when I made my record with Tony and Ethan, my first record, I was pretty positive that I was a folk artist and that I just wanted to make it on a 4-track with nothing else.
Mm,
And they kind of like opened my eyes and showed me what production can be. That production
mm,
doesn't just mean I'm going to change your whole sound. It means we're going to find it. We're going to find something new. Um, and now I consider that like half of the writing process, showing it to them who, and they're both musical savants. So
mm.
they reinterpret things I do to all these different instruments and sometimes have way too insane ideas where I'm like, no, there's not a bongo solo on this part or whatever. But it's so fun to be able to go into all these different avenues and find your own taste too.
Yeah. Well, and y'all have such a wonderful. I can hear the respect you all have for each other as artists because there's some things that y'all are doing in these songs with the arrangements that are so thoughtful. Like I still think about this all the time. The second verse of Funeral,
Mm-hmm.
when the strings just slowly start to swell. And the full swell hits at the end of the verse before the next chorus. And it's like, oh, they really thought deliberately about doing it that way. And I can hear the attention to detail. And I'm just like, that is a group of folks who get each other. And I really respect it. I like that. It's good.
It's so good. And it's also about making mistakes. I think comping gets kind of a bad rap sometimes, especially in music that takes itself seriously, where you're like, like a Gillian Welsh makes all her records on tape,
Mm.
and there's no comping involved. But I feel like the way
Tell our
that
folks what comping means if they don't
oh
know.
yeah, yeah. So comping just means, so if I'll sing the song 5 times, and they're like, man, the first time you sang it, this first chorus is very like your voice sounds really dry and it's really emotive. But then the last chorus, we want to use your last take where you're the most warmed up. So it's just
And you
trading
kind of
out.
pick and choose and trade it
Yeah,
out. Yeah.
you pick and choose different takes. But my favorite thing to do is delete. So in the case of Funeral, it's like we let Chris and Gabe, who were playing the strings, do whatever they wanted, and we were like, just play everything that you think a million times, and then by the end, they had kind of written their own arrangement, and then where you choose to take things out is very effective to me. It's like,
Yes.
why is that part gone now?
Yes.
And it's because I want you to listen to this section, or why can't there be a harmony there? It's because I'm saying something really dark, and it shouldn't be like harmonized
Yeah.
with.
Yeah. No
So
major third on that lyric. You can't do it right
exactly,
there.
exactly. Which is definitely the case on the second verse of Funeral. I was like, we can't really sing harmonies on that. Um, so yeah, delete is your friend. I think there's like 180 tracks on I Know the End that we had to then delete. Like
Wow.
we literally recorded ourselves stomping, and we're like, this is too much. This is way too much.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. You would make a wonderful podcast editor because we got to slash and burn
uh,
so much.
that's so rad.
We
Yeah,
cut, we cut,
I
we
love
cut.
cutting.
I love it. I have a few more questions for you because we've already gone over an hour, but I've so enjoyed this time with you.
Totally.
Um, so I was telling you earlier how like your music has been my 2020 soundtrack. It has just given me permission to feel my feelings in a very deep and I think healthy way, and I appreciate you for that. But I'm wondering what has been your soundtrack for this crappy year called 2020?
Hmm. I I love the Perfume Genius record. Um
Yeah.
that that came out kind of at the beginning of COVID.
Talk about
For
feels.
Yeah, totally. And it's so beautifully it fluctuates in feeling so much where I'm like dancing around, and his lyrics are very similar where you're like, "Oh my god, this song is so happy," and then you read them. Um so I love that record cuz it felt happy but not in a vapid way. You know, like I didn't feel like I was ignoring the world listening to it.
Mm-hmm.
It just made me
Mm-hmm.
feel good to listen to. Whereas like sometimes you hear too happy of a song and you feel like you're in a really really dark scene in a movie or something.
You're like,
Like that's
where's
the
the
song they'd
murderer?
pick. Exactly.
Yeah.
Um Loved the Fiona Apple record
Yeah.
so
You are
much.
up for a Grammy in the same category she is, right?
Indeed, and which is the
Congrats.
biggest honor ever. That record is insane. Like I don't really do this that much anymore because I think I need a little bit of a buffer between me
Mm.
and emotional music, but I put the record on and just laid on my bed and stared at the ceiling like I was 16. And uh but I will say I had to listen to that. I only listened to it for like 3 days in a row nonstop, and then I was like, this I need a break. Like this is
Yeah.
so intense.
It's some heavy stuff. Yeah.
Super heavy and still one of my favorite records. Like I think that being that affected by something this year was actually really nice, and have to say uh by the time the Bright Eyes record came out this year, I just was like an open wound. And I thank God I'd already heard it like 100 times before it came out, but when it came out I did a very similar thing and was like, man, how can I listen to this? It's so good and so satisfying though, and it does kind of seem more than any other record to me this year that it predicted the future. And like I said, Connor's just like, no, I'm just a nihilist, and I always have been. It sounds like I predicted the apocalypse, but I've been singing about it since like 2001. So, but yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm thinking now about my soundtrack for this year. Probably I played you the most, and I played that new Dua Lipa album
Oh
the
yeah,
most. And
yes.
y'all are like two polar opposites.
I love
But y'all
that.
were my two. Y'all were my two for the year.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
Predict. This is the last question, I promise you, because I've taken up so much of your time. Last
No, no
question for
worries.
you. Predict what's going to be the soundtrack for 2021, at least
Ooh.
thematically. We're going to be in a different mindset, I hope, once that vaccine hits.
You mean like what's the music gonna be like?
Or what do you want? What kind of music do you think folks will gravitate towards in a
I think
new, hopefully post pandemic year?
I think we deserve a summer anthem that everybody loves. You know, like the song that comes on in the bar that everybody is
Yeah.
obsessed with for one summer. Um my friend Morgan Martinez tweeted something about how there should be like there should be like a COVID night at nightclubs where you play all the music that nobody got to dance to in 2020,
Dude. Yes.
which I think is
Yes.
genius. Um,
Yes.
I think that I've already written songs that are pretty obviously about being in quarantine or isolation and stuff. And I hope that we are choosy with that genre of like writing about now because it's so hard, because it's so universal. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, maybe there'll be like some beautiful album that just encapsulates this whole year. I guarantee you we're gonna get some weird one sheets, some weird stories from publicists about like this person went to the woods to live with their mom, but then their mom
Uh-huh.
got really sick, and then they wrote this, and this is a 4-track recording, or this was all made on an iPhone, or like there are going to
Uh-huh.
be a lot more weird
Mm-hmm.
recordings So maybe we'll get our like maybe we'll get next year's like Bon Iver for Emma record out of that,
Okay.
which would be sweet.
But also a summer anthem too, because we got to have that.
Yes.
Let's like
Yes.
bring T-Pain back for a little while.
Exactly.
You
That's what
know,
we
he could do
need.
it.
Totally.
Oh my goodness. I could ask you so many more questions, but I'm gonna let you get on with the rest of your day. But I gotta tell you, Phoebe, this was just a treat. I really can't thank you enough for your music. It is sometimes the timing of the art that we find and consume is just perfect, and I think it was that for me this year with your music. You really gave me permission to feel in a very real way, and I cannot thank you enough for that.
Oh, thank you so much. I feel it's very weird that I haven't met you because I feel like your voice is just on when I'm alone all day. So
Oh
so
my goodness.
this has been yeah, very surreal and thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you. An honor. Let's do it again next album.
Yes, please.